Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno. Hope you guys are having a fantastic holiday season. I sure am having a busy one. Something a little bit new here today. So last night I did a live stream. I stream quite often on twitch.tv/the and I was thinking to myself after the stream that this live stream I think would be quite useful to a lot of people to see more or less my process when it comes to actually implementing a feature, and specifically something that I've never done before. Because last night what we decided to do was mouse picking so that we could actually select an object in our 3D scene in the Game Engine series version of Hazel, using a new technique that I had never done before. And so this was kind of my interpretation of, I guess, that technique, and me kind of stumbling through it and getting it to work in a way that I thought was useful. And I kind of walked through my thought process and asked the questions from the stream. And this kind of content, I think, while it's quite long, I think this is going to end up being like an hour and a half long or something like that. It's probably going to be quite useful to a lot of you to see how, what my work actually looks like, rather than just presenting you with the Game Engine series where everything's already been worked out. Because I know that a lot of you can't make it to all of the live streams, and so you end up missing that kind of experience. Now, if you can't make it to live streams but you really want more of this content, I do actually upload all of my live streams in their entirety for my Patreon supporters. So if you support me with at least $5 per month, you'll get access to my entire backlog of live streams. So if you find that you really enjoy this content and you don't mind supporting me and Hazel and everything that I'm doing, then patreon.com/thecherno is a good way to get more of what you're about to see. Anyway, please let me know if you guys enjoy this content, because I might do more of these kind of live streams. I've even thought about editing together some of my live streams into more concise blocks, because I find that, naturally during the course of a stream, cool stuff ends up happening. Chat asks questions that I answer, and I think that's a lot of interesting stuff that a lot of my YouTube audience misses out on. So definitely give me some feedback in the comment section below. But other than that, I hope you guys have an amazing Christmas and a very happy new year, and I will see you next year. No, I'm gonna make more videos this year. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Anyway, so we have this kind of pink cube. I think we have the editor camera now. We have gizmos. I guess like picking would be a natural next step, but I also don't know if that's something we really want to do yet. So mouse picking is an interesting problem, right? Because there's varying solutions. There's a lot of solutions to it, and some of them are, so aside from just having pros and cons and not even thinking about things like performance, they in general, they almost solve different problems, right? So as an example, a very interesting, like a very simple way to solve it, I guess, is to basically project the mouse position as a ray going from the camera's frustum into 3D space into whatever pixel we're looking at, right? Because that's basically the reverse of what we actually do. So when we render something, we have this like representation of an object of vertices in world space. They don't have to be immediately, like usually they're in local space, then we multiply it with like a transform matrix, which brings them into world space. And then we multiply it by essentially another transform matrix, which is the camera's view, because we want to position it based like relative to the camera and where the camera is in the world. And then finally we multiply it with a projection matrix, which projects it into like a -1-to-1 space, which is eventually what we see on the screen. Now, if we were to reverse that, because we can easily just from the mouse cursor calculate where the mouse is in that -1-to-1 space, where the pixels eventually end up. So if we take it through that, and then we multiply it with the inverse of the view projection matrix of the camera, then we wind up with having basically a point in 3D space and a direction as well, because the camera has orientation. We essentially, because we have that point, which is, the point is just, the origin is just the camera's position, and then the orientation dictates the camera, the direction of the ray, and then the range between -1-to-1 basically dictates where in the frustum it is. So if we do that, we wind up with a ray in 3D space in world space. And so all we have to do is do a collision check between that ray and usually first the bounding box of all the meshes, and then eventually like the actual individual triangles. And that's an easy way to see whether or not we actually have clicked on an object in 3D space. That has a lot of benefits and some drawbacks. The benefits are, because we are physically projecting a ray in 3D space, we have a lot of information about what happens with the hit. We know the distance from the camera, we know the normal of the surface, we know the angle between the camera and the actual triangle that we've hit. We can get any vertex attribute we want. And so when you think about applications such as vertex painting, like if I want to paint a texture on this surface, and obviously it's in 3D space, we need to project array, because if we don't do that, we can't figure out where stuff goes, right, in the texture. Because obviously if you think about clicking here, not only do we have the triangle information, we can actually use some interpolation to work out the actual texture coordinate, and then therefore paint into that portion of the texture and do some pretty cool stuff, right? So we actually get a lot of benefits from there. Now, the drawbacks, I talked about a little bit about them in my game engine, in the last Hazel devlog, which was about skeletal animation. So the problem is that if we have an animated mesh, that doesn't work. But then again, for an animated mesh, you don't need vertex painting. So there's another method that's quite common, which is basically just having an additional render pass, which draws every object with a different color ID, with a different color. And based on, so in other words, we draw one object with this color, then the next object with this color. Every draw call has a different color. Presumably every draw call is a mesh. If you have sub-meshes, you can split it up so that every sub-mesh has a different color. It doesn't really matter. You're basically setting a uniform color. It can be whatever it wants, right? And then that render pass will basically output it. Now you can do this in your main pass as well. It's possible to just, use multiple render targets, I guess, hook up a different... I've never done this before, by the way, so I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's definitely possible to hook up another render target and then output the color ID of the object into one place, and then the... is there an actual draw ID? I guess that only applies for instance rendering, but maybe a draw ID is actually built into GLSL. I'm not sure though. Like probably not though. Why would that exist if it's not instanced? Anyway, the point is you render each object or each submesh or whatever on earth you decide to with a different color onto a texture, into a frame buffer. Obviously, the frame buffer is the same size as the screen. It's very easy to figure out where the mouse is in a 2D coordinate. And then you just have to work out, hey, when I click on this and I get a readback of that texture into CPU, which is a little bit of a slow part, right? But if you can get those pixels on the CPU and actually just do a little check, you can essentially sample that color, right? And I guess you could do this on the GPU and have some kind of weird output, but that's also weird. Usually you do a readback to the CPU and just do it on the CPU. And you can figure out, hey, I've clicked on this color, what object ID is this, and then you can select the object that way. So that's kind of also an acceptable solution. Now it's not bad, but you literally, it's very black and white. It's very binary. It's very you've clicked on object 5. That's all you get. Which for selection is probably good enough. But for, stuff like vertex painting or any other information that you may want, it's garbage. And also you have that little potential GPU stall. I don't think that really matters because you can just get it the next frame. And in a threaded renderer, you usually are 1 frame behind anyway. So I don't think it's a huge, I don't think it's huge. But anyway, my point is that's probably what we'll end up doing. I imagine that we'll have both solutions though. That's pretty standard because again, sometimes, as I said, you do want to know exactly what you're looking at, but sometimes it doesn't matter. So that's probably what we'll explore. So we could try and jam that in now, because I guess one of the natural progressions to this is I want to be able to actually select something, and having to click on stuff kind of sucks, doesn't it, right? Like having to select stuff in the scene hierarchy panel kind of sucks. So I think maybe we can actually make it so that we can just click on something. Now, we're dealing with sprites at the moment, potentially in 2D space, but again, it's not really in 2D space. And I don't think it matters that it's not in 2D space. I think that if you just pretend, if you just say that, okay, Hazel's in 3D, sure, you can render the camera as orthographic, you can do this or that, but for mathematical purposes, we can just say, sorry. To reply to something. Okay. So yeah, so mathematically and for the purposes of this, like it doesn't really matter, you know, we can just still do that object ID thing. And I mean, because that, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Again, we're just rendering all of our objects in flat colors. It's kind of like this. Even this makes sense. These are all flat colors, right? This whole object that we're rendering, which is like, you know, the, which one is this? This is the, that's the camera. The left one, right? So left. This whole left is a particular pink. It's this is the color value of it. This is the hex value of it, right? It makes sense. You know, if you click on that, you can just do a reversal lookup and figure out. So let's try and integrate something like that, I think. I don't know if I want to add another frame buffer to our current frame buffer, add another texture attachment to our frame buffer so that we can use multiple render targets, or if I want to do this as a completely separate pass. The reason is this is not needed whatsoever in runtime. It's just an editor thing. And if it's just an editor thing, it can be in the editor runtime because, like, you know, if you're debugging or whatever, you might still want to select an object to view its stuff based like from the mouse pointer. No, so, okay, so what Napoleon's saying, doesn't really, in order for you to do that though, you need to basically use up a lot more texture bandwidth, right? Because you're basically creating a G buffer in that sense, which is a lot of texture. Like that can be a lot of textures. I don't know, maybe I'm still thinking in like mobile terms because that's where most of my like professional experience has been in, but that's a lot. Like a G buffer is quite a lot of bandwidth. And you probably will have, like we will have some sort of G buffer-esque things, right? It isn't, yeah, and again, I'm not gonna get too much into this. I get that it's in an editor on a workstation PC, but remember, we have to picture debugging as well, right? Like, I'm on a mobile device, something's wrong, I wanna be able to tap on an object to see exactly what the deal is, right? And again, I agree that that's more of like a let's solve that problem when we even get onto mobile devices. It doesn't matter, we can still have this solution here. But, oh, no, sorry, you're talking about vertex painting. No, of course. You'll never be doing vertex painting most likely on a mobile device unless you made a game that does that. So yeah, that's a good point. And I think we will have G buffer, like we will have auxiliary buffers with information such as not like world space normals and other stuff like that, because we'll need them for post-processing effects and stuff like that, right? So that's definitely going to be needed. So yeah, like ultimately it's not a huge deal. We'll see. Again, like the ray stuff is nice. I like the ray stuff because, you know, you do get like distance between camera and object is really easy to compute. There's a lot of stuff that's easy to compute, and I think it might even be faster because once you start reading back 4 or 5 textures per frame from the GPU back to the CPU to work out certain things, that can be really annoying. Ray tracing plans and fog, I don't know, not for a while. I do want to do ray tracing, but it's just not needed yet. All right. So how would we do that? How would we do that? So again, I am thinking of just doing it in an additional render pass. We do have a frame buffer class that is, I don't know what it's like. I think I might rewrite it soon to be more like the Hazel Dev frame buffer, which is just better. Because we need this to be a bit more flexible, right? At the moment, we create a frame buffer. What does it do? We give it a specification, which is just basically this junk, and then it creates a very straightforward texture, RGBA only texture with linear filtering, and adds a depth stencil attachment to it, which is great for our main buffer, but not good for anything else. So we probably need to create a better situation for that. Now, I rewrote the frame buffer class in Hazel Dev recently. I mean, the Hazel Dev class before the rewrite was already more advanced than this, obviously. Have I implemented ray tracing before? No, I have not. I've never done any real-time ray tracing stuff before, so I'm quite excited to do that. So if we look at the frame buffer class, I'll show you guys how frame buffers work in Hazel Dev. Okay, so this is how they work. We have a geometry buffer. This is what it looks like. You create a frame buffer specification, just like I guess you do in Hazel as well, because it's the same kind of design. And then what you do is you actually set the attachments. So these attachments, this is an initialized list of what we want. So we want an RGBA16F, another color attachment, obviously, an RGBA16F, and then a depth attachment. And then if you look at what this is, it's a frame buffer attachment specification, which basically takes in a vector of attachments, and these frame buffer attachment specifications actually have potentially other stuff aside from the format, but for now they're just format, and there is a constructor that takes in format, which is why it's implicit, and you can just specify a format without having to create this struct. And then we have a whole bunch of formats here. And as you can see, it looks quite nice. You know, if you're creating like a frame buffer and you want 2 color attachments and a depth attachment, that's what it looks like. If you want just a color attachment without a depth attachment, that's what it looks like. You know, everything's really clean, everything's really nice. So I think I'll probably end up creating something like this for the Hazel, for Hazel not dev, which is what that's gonna look like. Like as in it's gonna look like this. I'm just looking through all this other stuff. So, oh wow, I'm still playing music. I didn't even hear it. Welcome, Edef. Glad to have you on board. I don't know, to be honest. Like it does seem like a lifelong project at the moment, because I'm sure that it's gonna keep evolving forever. And it is pretty ambitious, so I don't think I'll be done anytime soon. But ultimately, I want to be able to, like, a shorter term goal. It's still a very long term goal, but it's shorter than lifelong. Goal is I want to actually bring Hazel up to the point where I can actually make a game with it and then release that game, right? So I want to ship a game with Hazel. That's one of the longer term goals, but one of the more serious goals. So clearly I'm working towards actually using Hazel to create something, because I'm a fairly creative person as well, and whilst I love programming, I'm not only like a technical engineer, I'm also like an artist, and I really want to actually, like, you know, make a game and convey like a certain like a story and a feeling and stuff like that. So I definitely am going to be making games with Hazel. That's the idea. That is the idea. Anyway, so that's kind of the way that frame buffers work. So we can probably, like in Hazel Dev, so we can probably do something similar here. Yeah, my own music as well. I write the music for it. My wife isn't like an artist. I mean, she's more of like a painter, not like a digital artist, but she's gonna like probably help out with art and stuff for that. And I don't know exactly what the game's gonna be yet. I don't really want to dedicate time to thinking about that just yet, just because, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for Hazel. What kind of game do you think Hazel will be good for? Ideally, like most things. Probably not like everything, but I want to keep it flexible enough where, you know, where you can add your own systems to deal with certain things, right? Because it's going to be fully open source. Like, you know, you'll just be able to modify it or add completely different renderers based on what you're dealing with, you know, if you want. All right. We can kind of deal with this anyway, I think, but let's take a look at this. So Renderer 2D is what's currently rendering this stuff, which is a bit odd because, I mean, it's clearly in 3D space and I'm calling it Renderer 2D, but the thing is, it is rendering 2D geometry in a way, right? Like there's no, there shouldn't be a concept of a Z coordinate for this. I think that the transform is just dictating the rotation, because we do take in a transform matrix. So it's a little bit weird, but whatever. So the idea is, we have a scene. We don't have a scene renderer, so maybe we should introduce like the concept of a scene renderer. Am I still live streaming? Twitch just said there's a network error. Yeah, I think I'm live. I think it was just the Twitch stream manager crashed. We don't have a scene renderer yet, which I should probably set up, but I don't know. I just kind of want to see if I can jam picking in like 5 seconds. Okay, good. I'm live. Great. No, I opened GL error checking. Well, I mean, I'm not using GL error because that's old school. But I do have like a callback for errors. So whenever there's an open GL error, it'll assert and I'll put a breakpoint in and I can see exactly where it occurred. So it's pretty standard. So how do we render everything? So we just do like render draw quad, right? And that's our scene. Okay, so this is like a little bit weird for this case, but it's okay. Because it's not that it's weird, it's just that it hasn't been written yet. So we have onUpdate runtime, which does the scripts, and then we have onUpdate editor, which doesn't do the scripts. Okay, and that's mostly rendering anyway. Yeah, okay. So the idea is, you can do this at any time. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But, you know, render to ID buffer. You know, we could have basically something else here. How does the frame buffer work here? That's a good question that I just came up with. I like to group these into scopes just so we can like reuse names like group, and so that things get destructed as well. What's the deal with the frame buffer? We might actually be... See, that's not great. This is why we need a scene renderer. We can probably... I think introducing a scene renderer is going to be something we want to do, but this is more fun. So I'm going to quickly jam this in and see. Because I've never done it before as well. I'm just interested. So... Frame buffer. Yeah, we just have we just have like a frame buffer here. Which is a bit weird. But sure. Alright, so we need a different, okay, yeah, so this is not correct. Like, we don't want to do this in editor layer, but color, we'll call this ID frame buffer. And see, the thing is, like, you know, because you have to resize all of them, and we should have like some kind of maybe frame buffer pool, which we will in the future actually, that deals with this stuff. Because yeah, we do all of this, like why is render command set clear color and clear in here? Doesn't make any sense, but whatever. And we have to have this frame buffer here. It's just a complete mess. Let's do active scene render ID buffer. I'll draw ID buffer. And we can just pop in. So don't worry too much about the API here, it's gonna change. Oops. Spec doesn't matter too much, so just do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and bind this target maybe. So once we do that though, we definitely need to override the shader that we're using. So yeah, and this whole thing needs to change actually. Like this is a batch renderer, which makes things even worse. Because we need to, like, ultimately, if it's a batch, like, we ultimately need to switch up everything. Oh, this is so annoying. How are we gonna do that? Yeah, that's terrible. We might have to add it as a separate, because like the thing is, like we can still set an ID per batch, which I guess in a way is probably what we'll have to do. In fact, that might even be better. So yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's quite an extension though, isn't it? Like, because we could have like a float, doesn't have to be a float, UN32T or something, object ID, or like quad ID or something, right? And this could be the sprite renderers, like, yeah, that could be the object ID of the actual entity. This is the entity ID, honestly at this point, because it's for 2D rendering and you can just have one sprite component and that's it. Because that's just sprite basically. So we could do something like this. But I'm just thinking though, because like honestly maybe it is worth just doing this in the main pass, because doing an additional pass with all of this stuff is it's definitely more complicated, and I don't know if it's worth it. So let's try this. Let's try this method, right? So when we do draw quad, and we have a lot of these, which is a little unfortunate, but I think this would be better. So so let's go to the scene class. And instead of doing it in a separate pass, let's try and do it in the same pass as this. So when we do a draw quad here, we use a transform, and that's the only way we draw it at the moment. So if that happens, then the one thing that's missing here is an ID for an entity, and we don't have entity IDs at the moment, which is a little bit of a problem. But ent obviously does have an ID, and we have the ID here. So technically speaking, this is probably okay. So I got rid of that, didn't I? Draw ID buffer. Did I delete that? No, I didn't. I left it. Okay, that's okay. Let's just not do that. I just want to see. I think at the end of the day, we're just gonna get a different oh. Are we still drawing the runtime? No, wait, what? Oh, right. We don't have anything to draw. Okay, so entity 3, entity 2, and 2. Yeah, so we clearly do have a different one here, right? So we can just pass that in, I think, right? So we'll pass in like the entity ID as like a UN32T. It can just be a normal int. I don't think it has to be like a uint or anything. So this is interesting. I've never tried this before. So if it's garbage, I apologize. I think this is what we want. I think this is the right draw quad. Whoops. Yeah, it is. That's probably like the last thing. Right. Wait, I'll fix that up later because we don't really ever do it, so it's okay. Oops. We don't really have a uint. Just let's do it as an int, whatever. All right. I think that's mostly okay now. So yeah, we physically have it there now, right? So now the only difference is if we look at the shader that we're using, which I think it's just the texture shader, right? Are we exclusively using the texture shader? It's the only one we ever load, right? Okay, it's clearly the texture shader. So let's go ahead and add in, you know, this. As an int. I don't know how that's gonna play, though. We'll see. We can use a flat int, I guess, since we're not gonna be interpolating. We need to clean up these shaders and make them more like Vulkan compatible as well. Let's go ahead and switch, let's stick a little core in here. Okay, where's my object ID? Alright, so let's go ahead and add a little ID buffer output. Can we just write an int out? Well, you might be able to. I'm not sure entirely. No, I mean, if it's an int4 maybe. Like an IVEC4. We don't even need that really. We just have a red buffer. Like, what's the point of that, right? I'm not really sure if that even exists. Let's quickly go to our frame buffer. What's the deal for a text image 2D? What's the deal? GL red. Could do that. GLR8. GLR8. R8I. Integer. UI. But is that 8 bits of... That's not good, is it? RGBA 32I. Here we go. R32I. That's probably what I want. GL R32I. I've never done this before, as I mentioned, like 500 times, so we'll see what happens. So let's do this. So that's my debuffer attachment. And this is so temporary. Again, when I actually do this for the game engine series, I think I'm gonna rewrite this class first because obviously this is silly. So GL, what was it? R32I. Never used that format before. That's an internal format, isn't it? Yeah, sized internal format. Now for an actual format though, I think GL red is probably what we're dealing with, right? GL red R32I. Okay, and I don't know if this should be. I don't know if this needs to be unsigned white. Unsigned. Oh, if it's an unsigned int. I guess it doesn't matter actually. We'll leave it at that. Nah, I don't know about. Definitely doesn't need to be near. Well, we're not going to be sampling from it though, so probably just going to be like a little storage, text storage or a render buffer or something. I don't know. Color attachment 1. GL draw buffers. I don't know. I think that's okay, probably. Might have to hook this up to RenderDoc because it's a bit weird. So by that logic, this should be okay. And then we should just be able to output that. So weird. So weird. Okay. So yeah, so that this just gets done in our main pass as I said. Let's just, I guess it should just work, shouldn't it? Let's see what we get. Well yeah, for this we can just use entity. And we probably want like a pixel buffer or something else. I'm just doing it as a frame buffer. And it's not happy with this either. And I'm not sure why. Frame buffer's incomplete. Texture type and format combination. Okay, yeah, it's the format. So maybe this is glint. That's a bit weird. Yeah, I didn't think that would be. But that seems like what it should be. What are the format options? No, not format. Oh, format. Sorry, that's not format. That's type. Format. What? That can't be right. Oh, that's the internal format. Oh, whoops. I got them the other way around. Why are you still upset? Texture type and format combination is not valid. But it's literally in the documentation. Internal format 32i. Format red. That's definitely valid according to the documentation. It's literally written as a pair. Oh no, that's a size internal format and a base internal format. But what about the format itself? But it's also GL red. Oh, it has to be red integer, I think. Oh goodness. Why was it showing me base internal formats? Who cares about that? Oh, great. Okay, it's not happy about something. Is it here? Really, GL drawback this is not happy about? Should I have done this after this? What? Maybe that's not how you do it. Oh, it's color attachment. Right. Alright, no errors. And and we do actually see something, and no errors. So, what should be happening now is we should actually have a buffer of weirdness going on. And let's see if we can actually read that back now. Okay. I assume this will be one frame behind, but if we just do GL read buffer, GL color attachment 1, GL read pixels. What the heck is this even? XY with height format. This is promising. Probably not. I know there's something called a pixel buffer or something that we can use instead for readbacks, instead of a frame buffer color attachment, but this should work. I know I'm doing OpenGL code in here, which I think is illegal, like literally, it's not gonna work. So, like I said, because we haven't included it. So active scene, pixel. Don't know what on earth, I don't really care. Just need to call a function here. Pixel me. Okay, so if we just do like, this is a coordinate. What coordinate? XY window coordinates are the first pixel. This is what, like, it's a pixel, right? So it's literally supposed to be with height and size and stuff. So maybe we can just do, because we will have to get this done anyway. Maybe we can just do this. Viewport, okay, how do we get I need the mouse cursor in a viewport space or something. There's a layer and there's mouse viewport space. So it's literally, we can just use this. And I think that's it, just I'm going to get mouse position. Maybe it will be good enough. Okay, so XY with height. This was the pixel rectangle with an height of one corresponds to a single pixel. Right, XY11. Type format GLint. So that's the size of the buffer data. What on earth? I don't know what the buffer size is. Oh, that's it. And then void data is the output. Oh, right. Don't really need buffer size. So int pixel data. Apparently that's it. Those are ants, right? Might also be upside down, but we will see. I don't know what's happened. Can't mix integer and non-integer data. What does that mean? Is this red integer or something? It doesn't say that that's a thing. Maybe it just didn't explain it. Oh, yeah, it just didn't explain it. These are some weird mouse coordinates, by the way. Okay, that's not remotely what I wanted. Thank you again, I'm GUI. So I think the viewport bounds is what we need to do here for MX, just to normalize it. And I think that's probably about it. And then there's also some clipping going on. Viewport width and viewport height. And we divide it by that, which is probably not necessary, but do need to do something like that. Okay, so let's try this a bit better. Now the viewport bounds, what are they? Because I don't think we have them. We just get them by doing this stuff. It's probably healthy to have that anyway. I don't know if we necessarily need them, because we do have some kind of IMGUI viewport stuff here. So I want to see what we have. What viewport panel size? Get content region available. Is that the same? No, this is window size, window position, which I don't think we even do. We do have window width and height. This is going to be useful for other stuff, obviously, as well. Now the real question is, do we do this before the image or after the image? Okay. So let's just stick that in here. What's this viewport offset? Ah, this is before we draw the image. So like here. And then for viewport bounds, which is, what's viewport bounds? It's that. Let's go ahead and stick that somewhere. Now we have viewport bounds, and now this should maybe work. The thing is, it's not going to go past a particular, like it might be outside of the viewport, which I don't know what's going to happen in that case, actually. We do have, that's why we have a width and height, just in case we need to deal with that, but I don't really know. Alright, so now this is like 0, 0. You can see we can go past as well. Okay, so let's see what on earth happens here. Okay, well, we're not crashing, we're not getting GL errors, so now the only thing that we need to maybe do is return an int here. And maybe like magic it will work. I have serious doubts about that. But, you know. Maybe it will be the best. Ooh. Well, it seems to change, weirdly enough. What are we clearing the buffer to? Oh, 0. I have a feeling it's flipped. Oh, I saw a 1 there. And if it were flipped, then. But why are these changing? That's a bit weird. Let me clear the buffer before we render maybe, but I don't know if that's something that's happening. Does GL clear all the color buffers? What does GL clear do? Or like all of the draw buffers, I guess, maybe? Because we have a render command clear, obviously. So we set the clear color to that, which, you know, is a little weird because Because I obviously want to clear the buffer to a different. Just something else. You can do a little clear text image. Okay, that's interesting. We can do that on bind, I guess, just to test it out better. But basically, I think that yeah, if we do clear text image, we use the ID attachment, level 0, format, gl red integer, gl int. Then we clear it to clear value. Which, since we're dealing with this, I can just set it to -1, right? This might work. I mean, I guess it should, right? Nah, it still is weird, isn't it? So right there, it seems to be 0. But I'm not sure why I'm getting all these weird values, because I shouldn't be, right? Oops. Render a 2D. Pretty sure this is in fact the function I'm using. But the thing is, let me just make sure maybe. I mean, I don't know. Oh. Oh no, it hasn't been set yet. 3, 3, 3, 2, 0. And I'm definitely not like using any other functions, right? Not. Odd. Odd. Yeah, the other thing could be the because I'm pretty sure it is in pixels, right? Is the just the fact that we might need to set my to viewport height minus my, but that's not, you know, causing all of this anyway, I think. No, it doesn't seem to be. Oh, well, actually, it does seem to work. It seems to work perfectly. It's just that, yeah, it's working perfectly. It's just the numbers are not really correct. But if you look at this, you'll see that when I put my mouse over a certain area, it's one number. Then as soon as I hit the left face, you can see it changed, right? Between the blank space and the left face. When I go onto the right face, it also changed, as you can see, and it's constant for the whole area. And then for the top face, it's 0. And it's constant for that whole area. So I'm not sure really what happened there, but location 5 in a object ID should be the 5th one, should be an int. I have a feeling that something's going wrong there. Maybe it's taking it in as a float. Maybe we don't have an int in our buffer situation or something. I'm not sure. This happens in the vertex array, maybe? Oh, you need to use int pointer. There's a special function of vertex attrib that's used for integers, so you can't actually use this here. So Hazel Dev, as an example, I think this is an OpenGL pipeline, has this situation. See, if the base type is int, it uses this, otherwise it does the other thing. So that's something that we need to do. And otherwise I think it's the same. Like, there's no normalization in other stuff, but that's probably why. So basically, let's grab this, because you can see we're doing mat 3, mat 4. Why do we even have that? Wait, what? What is this code? Why do we have this? Attrib divider and matrices. This is like for instance rendering. I remember doing that. Who did that? That's odd. Oh well. Yeah, so for integers, we'll, and maybe for I'm not sure about booleans, but let's grab this for now. It's very weird. Vertex attrib I pointer, and I think basically normalized goes away, and I think everything else is pretty much the same. So maybe let's try now, and let's see if we get the same result, because I'm feeling, I don't know if this will work or not, but no, it doesn't seem. Oh, there we go. It worked, right? So these are still weird values. I don't know why it's clearing that, but now you can see we actually get 0, 3, 2. So it works. Works perfectly. But then if we're outside of the range, it's a weird value, and I'm not sure why that is. It should be -1. Which obviously should be like a signed integer should be able to be -1. So why that's happening is beyond me. We should also do a different thing where what's it called? I called it pixel for some weird reason. So, yeah, so this should only happen, I guess, if mx is greater than 0 and greater or equal to 0. What even are these? I know I'm using auto, but what are these? Floats. I don't know why they're floats. Let's thank you for the Prime subscription, Sinli Yusan. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Yeah, mouse coordinates as floats and doubles are sometimes annoying. Sometimes they're not, just purely because of the mathematical purpose. Because, you know, if it's an integer and you divide by it, so if I'm getting the viewport width and it's an int, and I divide by that, I could accidentally wind up with a rounding error because it doesn't integer division without me knowing. So in that case, floats are kind of useful. But yeah, in a lot of, I agree with you. It's kind of like a dilemma because you don't know if it's going to work, like if it's going to be useful or not. Anyway, I'm just making sure that I got my ranges right, and it looks like I do. So that's narrowed it down a little bit. And then the other thing that I want to do, and by the way, I think at this point we can move, well, soon we can move it into the other thing. But also, yeah, I still don't understand why when I bind my frame buffer, it's because it clears it later, I think. Like, as in, I think it clears it again, and maybe that throws it off. Because it doesn't clear here. So that clear color, and then a clear, and then I think that clears both. So in a way, that's a bit weird. So let's do this, which is, I know, stupid. But it's just temporary, just to see if it's working. Nah, this is like, I'm planning, you could say I'm planning a video. Yeah, there you go. There's your -1. All right, everything's working now. So now you can see we have, if we're not over an object, we have -1. And then as soon as we're over something, we have the object ID. And this is even like batch rendering and everything's working. All right, so now the last thing that remains, right? The last thing that remains is basically to make it so that this code only runs if we click. And that of course is just us going to on event. We don't have a mouse click event yet, but that's okay. On mouse button pressed. Mouse button pressed event. So this doesn't even do the weird color thing. You don't need a color. You just like output the object ID into a separate buffer. Like, don't need a color at all. What is this, like mouse button left. Then we do this. Is this a thing that you might consider doing in Hazel Dev? Yes, absolutely. We need to do it in Hazel Dev because of animated meshes. So this is, yeah, definitely going to be done in Hazel Dev with a better API though, of course. Mouse button process returning. Well, traditional picking is the raycast. It's like a geometry intersection with a raycast. Oh, Sin Liusin, thank you so much for the $10 donation. Glad you've been enjoying the stream. Required buffer's missing. It's because I clicked or did something weird. That's okay. I shouldn't have clicked yet. Well, as in, I shouldn't have allowed to click because we have no buffer, I guess, that we rendered to. And also, this shouldn't happen if I press Alt, and there's a number of reasons why it shouldn't happen. Oh, actually, it's just not working at all. All right, that's okay. I know why that is. It's because we haven't bound a buffer. So, but we shouldn't have a buffer. Like, I don't think we ever unbind it, right? So that's a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, I don't really like know if this is like we could just do this every frame, just because I think, like, you know, we might want to hover over something and see some information. So I don't even know if doing it like press should be the selection for sure, but hovering over something maybe should be processed every frame, and that would probably make this code a little bit better. But I'm not sure why. Oh, we actually do unbind it. Wow, that's not necessary. How mouse picking works is absolutely dependent on, whoa. Okay, we do need to unbind it. How mouse picking works is completely dependent on how you implement it. There's different ways of doing it. I'm confused as to why that doesn't render anything if you leave the buffer bound, because surely something else binds, like the ImGUI buffer, or something else happens. I'm not really sure why that happened at all, but whatever. All right, so now you can see that if we click somewhere, we get -1. If we click on one of these, ideally we'd get what we what we want, but we don't. Active scene might be empty. Okay, this is, I don't want to do it this way anyway. This was just to test something. Because what I want to do is I just want to leave it here. Once we render everything, of course. And at this point in time is when we do the, we now have an active object ID, and that's kind of the point. So the cool thing we can do now is have m entity, m hovered entity, right? And this hovered entity is going to be 0 by default. But then here, if we actually get back a pixel that isn't 0, then we have something. So basically, 0 is a valid end thing, which is why we need to basically get that pixel back. And then if pixel equals -1, we can set hovered entity equal to entity, which, by the way, will just, as far as I'm concerned, will just set the entity handle to be null, right? Which is what we want. Otherwise, right, so we can do a little ternary operator here, actually. So if it's -1, we'll set it to entity. Otherwise, we'll set it to, and this is the cool part, we can just set it to entity pixel and then active scene, because the color is the ID. So actually we wind up with something pretty cool. Active scene's a ref, so we just need to make sure that we get the raw pointer. But that's it. Pretty cool, right? And that's our kind of handle. So now let's go into here and do I'm GUI text hovered entity. And this is where it gets fun, right? So for now, we'll do hovered entity as like a uint32t or whatever. I think that should show up as like %d should be okay. Right, now what do you want? Entity, so it wants an actual ent handle. Sorry, what was this, man? Entity. How's that? Is this better? So now we have a hovered entity there, which has a stupid value at the moment, but pink cube. But now you can see as we hover over something, we get a value. Now I definitely don't want it to be 0, but that's just because it's like null or whatever. So I don't know though, because it definitely shouldn't be. I'm not sure why. Does that actually? Yeah, that does construct it to null. A little bit weird, isn't it? Entity handle. That's weird, isn't it? I guess we're casting it to uint32t. Okay. So hovered entity. Do a string instead. Okay, and yeah, as I said, this is where it gets interesting. So we can do if hovered entity doesn't equal ent null, right? Then we've actually got an entity. So we could do std string name equals null or whatever. Hovered entity get component. Everything has a tag component, and you can probably see where this is going. Name equals that. Dot. We should have an implicit constructor, but whatever. I mean implicit operator, but whatever. Tag name dot cstring. All right, so this is even more exciting, right? You piece of junk. Why are you doing this to me? Oh, know if that's necessarily a good way to do it though. Sorry, I'm not sure if that, oh, we actually have that. Sorry, my bad. We actually have that. So that returns the entity handle. So that should work. I'm not sure why it's being a jerk. Maybe because it doesn't know if it's whatever. We're doing like some mouse picking for this stuff. So, okay. So if you pay attention to this Hobbit entity now, you can see it says null, right? We don't have any entities in the scene, so that's to be expected. But then if we load up Pink Cube, it still says null, and then you can see when we actually hover over it, now instead of having a stupid ID, it actually says the name of the entity. So we have null, and then obviously top, right, left, we see all of this stuff. And then the final piece of the puzzle, which is the exciting part, I guess, is the selection. And the selection is just us doing, mouse button left. The selection is just us basically going into this piece of code that I already wrote, and then just saying that, I guess, like we have a selection, right? I think it's in the scene hierarchy panel. We have some kind of like either set selected, we have a get selected entity. We can't set a selected entity, so that's what we need to do now, right? So set selected entity. And then that will just, well, I guess everything's like, that's the nice thing about ImGUI as well, everything's immediate mode. So we can just do selection context equals entity, right? Presumably taking in an actual entity like this. And that's kind of it, like, we don't have to, I don't think we have to do anything else. And it should just update to the selected entity. And then the final thing is we also have, I think it's either like a callback or, no, I think we just get the selected entity every frame, don't we? So, well, because what do we do here? We do in the ImGuizmo stuff, how do we get the selected entity? We just get transform, where are you? Selected entity is what exactly? Scene hierarchy panel. So actually scene hierarchy panel, My Secure Gift, thank you so much for your subscription. Welcome. Welcome to the stream and to the family of subscribers. Yeah, so realistically, right, with the mouse button press, all we need to do is just set the scene hierarchy panel then. Set the selected entity to the selected entity if there is something, right? So it's interesting how this works because I think you can just clear this. So you can set the selection context to null. That's fine, right? Because we can obviously, we can't deselect stuff at the moment. This is gonna make things even better, I think. Because I think, yeah, actually. So I think we literally just always set it to whatever entity we're hovering over, and that's literally it. So let's see if this works. All right, so now you can see what I'm hovering over, and if I click, I should be able to select the right one. And of course, with these gizmos, it's even better. Now, we don't want it to, there's some other things we will probably want to tidy up. So for example, we don't really want this to work with if we're pressing Alt and stuff like that, because Alt is for, there's a lot of things. If the gizmo is present, we also don't want to do it. So like, I think there's like, no, but press and ImGuizmo is active or is using, we want that to be false. And input is key pressed, key like left alt. I don't know, you probably want to have like a bunch of stuff here. But, and stream, I'll answer your questions in a minute. Okay, that's just upset now. So ImGUI is using has to be false and that has to be not pressed. Sorry. Okay, so if I'm actually moving, I obviously don't want the selection to change, and you can see it's not, right? And then obviously if I also use Alt, I don't want the selection to change, and it's not. So there you go. Let's create a new entity. Let's add a sprite renderer component to it. Now I can select the new entity. And everything does look pretty flawless. Oh, oh, that's weird. Okay, so the other thing that we need to do, there's actually one more, and that's Gizmo is over. Has to be false, because in that scenario, as you saw, I hadn't yet begun I haven't begun to use Gizmo yet for actual like manipulation, but it was still at a point where it was like over something else, and it was ruining everything. So that's this one. I can select the white one, presumably. Yeah, moving the pixel like that. Well. Okay, I can still use Gizmo while using Alt, but that's an Gizmo problem. Like, as in, you just need to add a little check to make sure you're not pressing Alt, because Alt is for the camera movement, and if you start moving the camera, you probably want to stop your manipulation. But yeah, that's picking. Really easy. Let's open a different scene, like this 3D example. Obviously, we can pick this stuff up pretty easily, and everything is working flawlessly. All right. So anyway, any questions? There were some questions. So, wouldn't it affect the frame time, especially when running a complicated scene? No, it won't. Doesn't really matter how complicated the scene is, because you're rendering it. You're setting a pixel ID per, like, just for every pixel that the fragment shader runs through. So yes, like you could say maybe, like it probably would scale with a scene, but it's not. It's never gonna be a bottleneck. Maybe the mouse picking stop during runtime. It could also be the mouse click triggers the additional render pass. There is no additional render pass. So the color IDs get generated as part of the one and only render pass. There's exactly one render pass in this whole thing. It's just that we output to multiple frame buffers. We output to a color buffer, which is what we display, and we output to that object ID buffer that we can then read back from, okay? So there is no, this is all done in one render pass. I'm not sure it understands how it works. Some objects have integer IDs and you mouse pick by rendering them to integer text with FBO and fetch the text while the mouse is on, kind of, yeah, basically. So every object has an ID because it's stored in an entity component system. And that ID happens to be something like 0, 1, 2, whatever, right? I mean, it's just pictured as like an integer, 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever, right? So what I'm doing is I'm taking that object ID, and then when I actually render a sprite like this, when I actually render a quad, I'm into the vertex data of each vertex that makes up this quad, which is 4 vertices because we use 6 indices, right? So each one of these 4 vertices actually contains the object ID. So the entity ID that's stored in ent, or an entity, the ECS system that we're using, we grab that ID and we actually pack it into the vertex data. And that way, when we do the rendering for this sprite, we can actually output that exact entity ID, which we know is an int, it's one single integer, into a texture that is only an int32 texture. So it's not like your classic RGBA texture. It's just one channel per pixel, and that channel is an integer. That's the type of data, a 32-bit integer. And then that way we end up with a texture that contains, for every pixel on the screen, it contains an integer. And that integer is either -1, which means there's no object there, or every pixel that makes up an object has that object ID there. So when we then move our mouse and then read back from that texture on the CPU and actually see what value is at that mouse coordinate, we either get -1 if there's no object, or an actual ID, or like, 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever, which is whatever object that pixel belongs to. That's it. Can you show us the picking buffer and render doc? I can. It's not going to be that useful to look at that. Sorry, I completely butchered that. Because let me see what's up here. It's not going to be that useful because they're not like colors that you can really visualize. You'll see like it's 0, 1, 2, like they're very small numbers, so they'll be mostly black probably. But we can still see what we get, I think. Okay, so if we look at something like this, I'll zoom in a bit. Why is that taking so long? Then you can see we have one color pass with 2 targets and depth. So where's this? So this is the draw elements. I can kind of see it, I guess. This is the color buffer. So there's a way to... Maybe we can change the channels. Can we see what we're sampling though? Yeah, so basically this is all -1. This top one is 0, which is why it's black, and this is 1 and 2. It's just they're both showing up as if they're float textures, which is the problem. But I think you can actually view the data somehow. I don't know why I'm playing with that. How do I view the buffer data? It'd be good if it actually told me, because it's clearly an int. It knows, the render doc knows it's an int. Oh, you can see it here. So this is very difficult to see. But there's a number over here. I don't know if you guys can see that. It says -1 at the moment. If I put my mouse here and right click to pick that, see how it says 2 now? And then this says 1, oh sorry, 3, and this says 0. The reason there's no 1 is like 0, 3, and 2 is because the camera must be object or entity ID 1, right? Set a custom range. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I don't know if there's a point to doing that. Yeah, I guess that kind of works as well. 0 to 3 or whatever. So you can, that's still 0, and you can see these are different colors basically. So yeah. Would it be possible to import 3D model from a 3D software package? Well, Hazel Dev you can. You can do that in Hazel Dev because you can load 3D models. Obviously, you can check out the latest Hazel Dev log on my YouTube channel. But we can't do that yet here. Will I add an outline like in Hazel Dev? Of course, eventually. Everything that's in Hazel Dev will slowly make its way to this. How did you manage to render the Vulkan scene to IMGUI? As I remember, it's using an texture ID to draw. Yeah, I had to modify IMGUI to let it work. So instead of taking in a texture ID, I take in like a Vulkan like texture. Well, the whole texture info thing. So like the image view, the image, and the view, I think, or something like that. And then you can bind that and render that. If you go through my Vulkan streams, I think they're on Patreon, you can see how I did that. I'm pretty sure I showed that on a stream. Maybe I didn't actually. No, I probably didn't. I think that was something I did off stream. Anyway, yeah, so that's how the color stuff works. It's pretty simple. Hopefully you saw that it was fairly simple. It's just, you know, we're going through every pixel rendering its color to this buffer, but here, instead of rendering the color of the sprite, we're rendering the object ID. And obviously it doesn't matter if this is 3D rendering or 2D rendering or whatever. It's just for each rasterized pixel, we're outputting the object ID. That's it. Will I be uploading to more Cherno? Yes, I will. I'm sorry. I've just been very busy lately, and I definitely am, you know, the main channel takes priority. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions before I end the stream? I kind of like this entity hover thing. It's nice because we can see what we're hovering over. But yeah, it definitely, like, even like a small change, like, I mean, I guess it's not like a tiny change, but a small change like this, you know, makes the editor so much more usable now, because object selection, object picking is definitely very useful. We don't have an outline yet, so it's hard to see what's picked, but you can definitely see it be reflected in, like, you know, the scene hierarchy panel as well. All right, cool. All right, stream. Well, hope you enjoyed the live stream. I will I should probably record an episode based on this, but again, this was done today. I did it in a fairly messy way. I just wanted to make sure that it actually works. It was like part of my planning process. I just wanted to jam it in basically as quickly as possible and see if it worked. I'm a little bit curious as to how other people do it, if they use it with like the pixel buffers or something like that instead of just a frame buffer texture like I did. I'm also not sure what the performance is like here. I don't really care much. I think it seems to work pretty well, and I don't think it's going to be dreadfully awful. Does this perform as good as like making a triangle intersection? I imagine this will perform better, actually. I think that there's definitely that kind of GPU, like, I don't know if it's like a stall, but like there is a slightly higher GPU cost, but this will scale extremely well, unlike the triangle thing. So the triangle thing, if you have a very dense mesh, or if you have a huge 3D scene, then it's gonna be a nightmare trying to get that to scale. I think even in Hazel Dev, if you load something huge, like 1 million triangles plus, then it's gonna take, it took like a few frames. Like every time you click your mouse, there's like a few frames of like nothing. It takes a few frames to actually do the 150 milliseconds or whatever I think it was when I checked it last. Whereas this will always be instant because it's not dependent on the complexity of the scene. It's literally just dependent on the size of your frame buffer, which is always going to be okay. So this is a much better way of doing it. It just gives you less information back.